Good morning, everyone. I'm Audrey Jordan. I am so happy to be here with you today. I can't multitask, so let me do this. All right. I'm so happy to be joining you today, part of a group of 3 amigas, Shiree, Teng, Kate Morales, and myself, who will be presenting at different points throughout the conference from a paper that we did together back in 2019 called Measuring Love, a brown paper. And what I will do during this session, I think David, Lee, and Ashley invited us because they wanted the point of view of some people of color about the things that we must change to more powerfully advocate for, partner with, people from marginalized communities. Our focus in this paper is on communities of color, but I believe what we're saying applies to other marginalized communities, for example, survivors of domestic violence, which, as we all know, is not a mutually exclusive group. So let me tell you a little bit about how I've structured our session today. I'm hoping that we can do 3 stints. They're not 30 minutes anymore, they're 25 minutes because we got to shave off 5 minutes. That's okay, we can make that adjustment. It just means I've got to discipline myself to talk less, which is a good thing. In those 25-minute stints, I'm thinking of them as me setting up a conversation that you all will have at your tables. Or if you're in the back, if you can talk with the person next to you or pull some chairs together and have a little conversation for about 15 minutes or so. We're gonna take some things in bits and pieces as we explore what this framework has to do with love expressed and what that means for what we will do in our work with people from marginalized communities. What I hope happens in terms of the outcomes for these sessions is that you'll understand and appreciate that we all have light and shadow sides so that we can better connect to those parts of us that we don't love and embrace, and that we can also then connect with other people and see the possibility of growth because of our shared humanity. I hope, secondly, that you'll be able to appreciate the choices we have the opportunity to make between being complicit or disruptive in an oppressive system that has taught us some ways to behave that we've internalized, we may even not be conscious about. But then to become aware of that, to make different choices so that we ourselves are transformed and that it's possible that that transformation can happen at multiple levels. And that transformation comes through love. Thirdly, I hope that we can gain some insights into some ideas, some techniques that promote deeper and stronger love for self and for others, using the concepts from our Measuring Love paper. So I'm gonna play a little clip here for you.
When you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need, when you feel so tired but you can't sleep, stuck in rivers, and the tears come streaming down your face, when you lose something feeling you can't replace. When you love someone but it goes to waste. Could it be worse? Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you.
Okay. No shade to Coldplay. I actually like that group and actually like that song a lot. But I use this song for illustrative purposes, and it relates to the topic at hand. I'm using it to illustrate an important point that really grounds our paper. Too many of us, I'm including myself, speaking to those who can hear what I'm saying in this room, too many of us approach our engagement with survivors or other marginalized groups who are looking for supportive services, help, support, as people who need to be fixed, and that we are the fixers. So a starting point for our paper here and what I want to communicate is that we all have been immersed in this system, this oppressive system, white dominant culture, patriarchy, that basically grounds us in concepts that actually help to enable or maintain oppressive actions, policies, processes, relationships with people that we seek to help. And if you want to know more about this concept, there's a wonderful founder of white dominant culture traits, tendencies, Tima Okun. You can look at her work on a site called Dismantling Racism Works, drworks.org, and learn more about this point. But features such as this either-or thinking, competition, they're winners and losers, being perfectionistic in our work, valuing efficiency over everything else, believing that the ends justify the means as long as we get the results we were looking for. A them versus us approach. My challenge to us today is to listen and think in terms of how we can disrupt ourselves, our complicity with such a system, and disrupt that in ways that we make some shifts, we make some choices in how we choose to show up and how we choose to engage with other people. How we dig underneath the surface of what is seen and counted and valued as real knowledge, as truth, to go underneath and find that emergent love that exists within us and our interest in connecting that really we divorce ourselves from. We become experts who distance ourselves, detach ourselves in relationships to people. Importantly, we learn how not to just rely on our minds if we make this choice, this shift to be disruptive. We learn also to value the knowledge that comes from our hearts, from our spirits, from our intuition, from our ancestors, from around us, as truth, just as important truth, maybe sometimes even more important as it relates to connection. We open our senses to our intuition, to other creative forms of expression, not just the written word, the reports, the data that we can get, but to music, to dance, to arts, to crafts. and we make space for others to do the same. So one very important part of what we're trying to communicate in this paper is that we have to learn to unlearn some of the things that we've been taught about what's valuable, just what we know with our heads and what we can express with the written word, to open up and access all these other avenues of meaning making, of what's important in life to us that come through the heart, the spirit, and intuition. Radical self-love means embracing light and shadow, a holistic loving and embracing of ourselves. So, and as with many things, this radical self-love is a really hard place to start. Oh, wow, I've already gone. Okay, I need to wrap this up really quick. Let me make a couple points. First, we have to see the structures for what they are. It's so funny to me. I was in this business a long time, and we very rarely talked about what created the circumstances that put people in these marginalized situations to begin with. We don't talk about racism. We don't talk about the ways that we're trying to navigate it ourselves. So the first call is to see it, name it, understand it, know the history of how this neighborhood came to be what it is, how the people came to experience what they're experiencing. And when you learn it, know better, be better, do better. Use that as an important way to understand how these inequities came to be. And then we learn to embrace those parts of ourselves that value difference, that value getting out of the box of knowing things only from written word and what our mind can tell us, but to being vulnerable, to being open to our hearts, our bodies, our spirits. Not getting stuck on our own self-absorption around that, but moving ourselves into a space of being able to engage with others. Understanding that there are parts of you that have been victim, perpetrator as well. And not letting that define you, just like you don't let it define the people that you engage with. So the point being that we can choose to be disruptive of what we might otherwise do unconsciously. So this is the end of what I wanted to say to you for this first stint. And I want you at your tables. I'm going to make this simple. At your tables, just talk amongst each other about any parts of what I said, what you heard that resonate with you, that really cause some recognition for you. What made you uncomfortable in hearing some of this? What made you excited? So let me stop there and let you all talk amongst yourselves for about 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll come back together and go into the next stint. I hope you had some really good conversation at your table. I know you're just meeting each other and talking a little bit about the question. But let's move to a conversation about love at its various levels. I mentioned multiple levels before. So you see these concentric circles, no surprise, it starts with self-love. I want to give this quote from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King that I'm sure many of you have heard that really relates to what we're talking about here. One of the greatest problems of history is that the concepts of love and power are usually contrasted as polar opposites. Love is identified with a resignation of power, and power with a denial of love. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. So with that quote as our backdrop, I'm just going to talk a minute about what it looks like to have this radical love in the context of an oppressive system that wants to take that away from us and our engagements with others. Love is indeed a radical, powerful act. So what does it look like when we're doing all this loving? At the self level, it looks like we're not afraid to be conscious of how we're in integrity with the own values that we espouse as our values. We're not afraid to look at those and say, am I doing that or not? And if I'm not, what's going on? How can I shift that? It looks like being able to be in critical analysis, not denial, of your thoughts and your behaviors, your relationships, how you show up. It looks like taking care of yourself. I heard somebody this morning talk about somebody who had 11 jobs and she was busy. Okay. We all have to work hard, but we also have to take care of ourselves. And this idea that being busy says something about how on top of things we are. I think we all know the falsehoods in that and how at some point you're going to burn both candles at both ends, right? So taking care of yourself, giving yourself time to rest, to reflect, to really ask those questions about how can I improve and how can my relationships reflect my values better. What does it look like when we're loving others? Deep listening to people, showing up, not having answers, not fixing people, really looking to see and hear what people have been doing to survive, to be resilient, to be strong. What are their interests? What are their needs? How then do I show up as the support to make that happen for people? Helping people dream and hope again. Forgiveness. Starting with forgiving ourselves, but also forgiving others, even when it's really hard to forgive. Because as we all know, forgiveness really is about us, right? When we can forgive and let go of that anger and that hatred and that rage, we can make space for what's next. How do we move forward? How do we grow the love inside of ourselves and engage with others? Love and community. This work is so hard. There's things you can do on your own, but man, when it's done in community with other people who are mutual support, who know what you're going through, who can share, who are up sometimes when you're down, and can practice with you to get better, to be better. Wow, and when you're engaging with people in marginalized communities, lifting them up, centering them, hearing them, focusing solutions on the things that they know work for them, spreading vision and hope, fighting for material change for people. Sometimes we ask people to get involved in all these organizing and advocacy efforts. People just trying to survive. People need stuff to help them. We ask people to do stuff for free. We ask people to show up on our advisory groups. We don't think about the hardship that is for people and what it means to support people so they feel confident and competent in those spaces. Those are the kinds of things we do when we're acting out of love. And of course, in a community that's powerful, that's organized, that's focused, becoming this catalytic force in an environment that really needs our attention for change. Sharing power, growing power with people, and building collective action for liberation. So one other part of this framework is this idea of transformation. So we use this little spectrum that is an old spectrum. I went to social work school, probably like a whole lot of people in this room. And we talk about the stages of change, right? Well, this is one representation of the stages of change that goes from what's unconscious incompetence on the left, which is a state where we are totally oblivious to the fact that we're clueless. And we need to be aware. We need to see some things we can't see. We need to recognize that there are skills we don't have. So something happens that makes us, aware that we've been missing something. and we can make a decision at that point. Unfortunately, we see today how a lot of people choose to be willfully ignorant and even vicious in that willful ignorance. Or we can choose to change. That moves us to a stage of conscious incompetence. Now we know we're clueless. Now we know we're making mistakes and we don't know. But in a community with people, in vulnerability and humility with people, we can become more aware. We can even become skillful with people. We'll make mistakes, but that's okay. People can pick us up, help us learn, help us grow, so we can move to a stage of conscious competence where we know we're getting it. We mess up sometimes, maybe a lot of times, but we know we're on a good track. We're trying to keep moving forward, and we're building our skills. We're building our vulnerability. We're building our humility along with people who are doing the same. To a stage of unconscious competence where it's like habit now. Now, like with most things, this is not linear. We always run into new people, new circumstances, new things. We get ignorant again. And so it's iterative, right? It's iterative. And we support and help each other through it. So that's my setup for your second discussion. What I want you to talk about at your table, and I'm going to share a little story with you too, that I hope kind of gives you an example of what we're talking about. A moment, a choice moment in your life where you knew you were clueless or you were struggling and something happened to help you know, okay, in this moment I could choose this thing or this thing. So, quick story. I was pursuing my doctorate degree back in the 90s, working in the East End of Richmond with a group of grandmothers who wanted to do a neighborhood door-to-door survey. And they very much wanted to collect information because at that time, there were no provisions or supports for grandmothers raising their kids' kids. The only provisions came to parents, but the parents were not present for a whole host of reasons. So these grandmothers wanted to go around, collect some information from their neighbors so that they could have data to help them make the case that they needed these services and supports. So I'm digging this, man. I'm working on my dissertation at the ivory towers, wanting to be rigorous and research and my PhD and all this. But I'm also digging being in this place, working with some folks who actually need to do data because they have change in mind, right? So we're putting this survey together. We've been at it a couple months. One day I'm with them, we're laughing, we're talking, we're creating these surveys. In comes my boss, Judy Bradford. I am like a deer in the headlights, right? Because I want her to know, I know research, I know what I'm doing. Don't judge me, And on the other hand, I really want to be of service and of help to these grandmothers. And if the question ain't that rigorous or we didn't pull it from some validated, reliable surveys and all that, that was okay because they wanted their questions asked. I don't even know what to say. I'm very well aware I'm in this moment. And Miss Annie Giles, the leader of this group of grandmothers, takes a look and she says, she's about 70-something years old, not a tooth in her head, but the wisest, most respected person in the neighborhood. She says, Judy Bradford, you done come in here and made Audrey nervous. Now I'm really petrified because it's been named, right? And she says, well, we know Audrey knows what she's doing. And what I want you to know is that we know Audrey cares. So long as Audrey cares, we ain't worried about what she knows because we know we're going to figure that out together. So unless you got something to say, what? And Judy Bradford, both of them, rest in peace. Judy Bradford, I can still see her sparkly blue eyes. She says, Miss Giles, I know Audrey knows what she's doing, and I know Audrey cares. I'm just here to learn. Well, in that moment, I realized what was important. And it really shaped the trajectory of the rest of my career in participatory evaluation and working on behalf of communities. So I want you to think of a moment like that, where you knew you were in one of those moments, where you could choose to do what you're supposed to do because that's what you've been taught to do, or you could do what you needed to do for a bigger reason. So let's spend some time at the tables, have those conversations. We'll be right back. It's great to have walked around just to listen a little bit to your conversations. I heard such familiar themes around being new to a position and really doubting whether or not you have the competence to do it, and figuring out that, you know what, I get the chance to try this job on for myself, and I'll listen to the people and not listen to that internalized oppressive part of me that's telling me I'm an imposter. Or rules, and how we have to follow the rules, and how maybe let's just try and think for a minute, not what we can't do, but what we might be able to do if we try to find a different way. I heard a couple of stories like that, so y'all are getting what I'm trying to say here, that there are touch points for us when we're working with people that we want to support and we want to help. And I like to think about these touch points as the points where we're engaging with people, from the beginning to during the relationship to as the relationship maybe ends or evolves. So I just wanted to point out touch points as choice points. First, before even engaging, understanding the context and situatedness of people and oppression and the chronic trauma that they're experiencing. We don't stop and do that homework enough. People didn't just show up in these marginalized communities in the conditions that they're in. There's a whole history there. And they can tell you about that history too. It's not just that people are indicators of not well-being, right? They're human beings who've experienced things and in a place that oppresses. So first, do your homework, right? Second, at that first meeting, the warm welcome, the validation of humanity, seeing the strength and agency of people and really believing that people have to be the stars in their own movies. We are not the people who are going to make life better for people in a long-term kind of way. They've got to do that themselves, and we've got to believe that they can and that they will. So what kinds of things can we do that position us to show up that way and engage that way, as opposed to pulling out the form and collecting data, intake form, blah, blah, blah. How do you warmly welcome people? How do you go where they are and not make them have to come where you are? Just things like that, right? A third touch point, periodic check-ins with people. How about, you have an agenda on those check-ins, but how about just connecting person to person? How you doing? What's going on? What's good? What's happening right for you? Centering their experience, their voice, their competency and capacity as a person to be resourceful and take care of business, right? Accompanying them to build from their strengths with humility, curiosity, and that learning spirit. Even engaging other forms, song, dance, art, culture expression. And group encounters. What are the opportunities for you to get out of the way and make space for people to lead, for people to engage their strengths and talents? What supports are needed for them to do that well and with confidence and with joy? It often doesn't cost a whole lot of money to do these kinds of things. How do you cultivate peer-to-peer mutual support between and among people where it's not depending on you or anybody from your organization to do that, to help people determine what the collective work and responsibility is together? To make space for sharing stories and celebrations, especially of love and power. those stories, when people felt love, when people were able to experience power. And then capturing those successes and those stories, documenting that in ways beyond just the written word. Innovative ways to capture. Spoken word, songs, dance, poetry. A lot of creativity is possible when we make space for it. So I want you all to have the third conversation, and before you do, that third conversation is going to ask you to think about touch points and some things you either do or could do differently that shift from a place of power over to a place of lifting the power and voice of others, right? So I right now have the privilege of working with a group of people in Memphis, Tennessee called valuators. That's another term that comes from our paper. People who look for the value in others and lift it up as opposed to evaluating people as objects and subjects. But these people are people who are actually change makers in their own right, do a lot of variety of things. But I'm going to share two examples with you of what we've been doing to try and document this love in action that we're talking about. Let me tell you about Tamika and her project. Tamika is the executive director of a community organizing organization. And in her organization, they go out periodically and they do various ways of doing outreach and engagement, talks, one-on-ones, sitting on porches, being in parks, lounging on the couch in parks. So on Juneteenth this year, she went out, and instead of asking the same old outreach questions she usually asks, she asked questions about love, people's experience with love. She was trying to develop what she called a love brick, a rubric for love. But this information she felt would be really valuable to her organization. So she asked people questions like, what's been your experience when you're seeking support and service from people when you need it? Getting people to talk to her about that. And then, were there any times you felt love in the process of getting those services and supports? And if so, what did that look like? What did that feel like? Talk about that some. And she got video clips and quotes from people. And you won't be surprised to hear that people don't expect a lot from service providers. They expect to be respected. They expect people to show up and be curious and interested in them and not coming with the rote questions. And people want to be seen. People want to be invited to share their interests and their skills and to be seen as capable folks. That hasn't been their common experience. You probably aren't surprised to hear. But Tamika is able to capture so many stories and quotes from people about the few times they did experience it and what that looked like. So let me tell you about Brittany. Brittany is what's called, wait a minute, a fiberworks artist. I didn't even know what that was till I met Brittany. But Brittany is an artist, and she uses yarns and fabrics and all kinds of other things to create artistic pieces. She does exhibits from time to time in Memphis around this because Brittany is on an exploration about what does it mean to be soft. And she doesn't mean soft like anemic and sentimental, like she means soft, having soft skills, having those love skills, and allowing that to come out of herself, because she's been taught the best thing for a black woman to do is be hard, be on guard, not let anybody get close and touch. So she's on an exploration for softness. So she has this exhibit and she invites people and she tells her story, and people really resonate with her journey. They understand what she's saying, and she's got quotes and things from people. One of the things that she does is she engages with people in an artistic activity of creating love expressions, little buttons that she works with people to create. To one word or one phrase or one picture or one diagram that captures what love is for you. And the only thing that people have to do is tell why they chose that, and then make 2 buttons, one for themselves and one to share with someone else as they share their story. So I just want to give you one example of what she came up with. One little girl talked about how she would come to class, a little black girl, smiling at her teacher, white teacher, never smiled back, never smiled back. And what that communicated to that little girl was not good. So she talked with Brittany about, I want to create a button that says smile. And I want to give that to my teacher. So I want to make 3. I'll make one to give to somebody here, but I'm going to give that to my teacher. And in fact, the little girl made those, and it made her smile and feel so good about making this button. She gave it to a white woman, and the woman was just so overjoyed as she heard her story. Just simple things like that. So what I want you all to do at your table is to talk about what it could look like if you implemented some kind of love practice along the lines of what I just described. At a welcome, at check-ins, and group encounters. Maybe you're already doing some things that you can share at the table. But the point is to be intentional about naming that, seeing it, documenting it as expressions of love. We'll come back in a few minutes. I just want to make sure to summarize the key points I was trying to get across today and close it out. So this was supposed to be a conversation about measuring love as prevention. It wasn't the kind of prevention that was talked about earlier today. It's prevention starting with ourselves, right? Prevention meaning undoing the circumstances that place people in oppressive conditions and not pretending that programmatic fixes or the way we've always done things are gonna be the answer. We are a key vessel for that. Whether we choose to be complicit with those kinds of practices and policies or we choose to disrupt them. Point 1. Point 2. Well, that is point 2, right? One powerful place of transformation begins with our own actions. Complicit or disruptive. That love is the antidote, that connection that we can have with people to indifference, hatred, fear, drivers of white supremacy culture. This means moving from habits of detachment and power over to connection and centering those, as Representative Ayanna Presley of Massachusetts says, closest to the pain. Transformed engagement involves self-love, first and foremost, practicing that, and then engaging with others in love with them, not only in our words, but in our actions, in our humility and our curiosity. Creating a beloved community where we can practice and learn and grow together, pick each other up together, move forward together. And then, if possible, bringing that community into a larger ecosystem as a force for change or transformation in these oppressive environments. Aspirational for sure, but a place where we probably have the most control over what can happen. It's what we do and how we show up. Transformed engagement expresses itself through head, heart, spirit, intuition, opening up space for the expression of those things back and forth. And transformed engagement is cultivated in a community of practice, elevating most prominently those with the highest stakes. That's what I hope you're taking away from today. I want to say a couple just closing things. This PowerPoint will be available to you on Valor's site at the end. If you're interested and haven't read the Measuring Love paper, you can find it at the website of shireeteng.org, ShireeTeng.org. ShireeTeng.org. You can find that paper and one we wrote subsequently. I need to do a shout out to my Compadre, Kate Morales. The beautiful illustrations that you saw are her creation. And I want you to know that they will be presenting, Kate will be presenting tomorrow at 9 a.m. on composting shame in Imperial B. And you'll see and hear more from them about that. Thank you so much for your interest and your engagement and your enthusiasm.